Welcome to Science Exposed, where we uncover the fascinating findings of science and make them relevant to you. And of course, none of this would be possible without the brilliant Dr. Cameron Jones, PhD whose passion for knowledge fuels all the topics we dive into. Today we're tackling a paper that really made me think, what if letting go of a goal could actually be the key to success?
That sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? But stick with us because today's deep dive is all about the surprising connection between the source of our goals and our tendency to, dig in our heels even when logic tells us to retreat.
We've all been there, haven't we? Pouring more and more money into a failing project, or clinging to a relationship that's clearly run its course. It's called escalation of commitment. And the research we're looking at today suggests that the source of a goal, where it came from, can have a huge impact on how susceptible we are to this trap.
Absolutely. And the researchers identify a type of goal source that hadn't really been explored before. Inherited goals. Think about it like this. You inherit a vintage car from a relative. You didn't choose it. You have no emotional attachment to it. But now you're faced with the decision of whether to restore it, even though it might be a money pit.
I get it. So are you saying that we might be less likely to get sucked into those money pit situations if we inherit a goal rather than set it ourselves?
That's exactly what these researchers wanted to find out. They conducted two fascinating experiments to see how people with inherited goals behaved, compared to those with self-set or assigned goals.
Okay, walk me through this. What do these experiments actually look like?
In the first experiment, they had groups of 3 people work towards the same goal. But here's the twist. One person set the goal for themselves, another was assigned the same goal, and the third person simply inherited it, like that vintage car scenario.
Interesting. So they were all aiming for the same outcome, but with varying levels of personal investment in the goal itself. I'm guessing they wanted to see how this affected their tendency to escalate their commitment.
Right. Spot on. They gave everyone a task and then gave them feedback that suggested they were unlikely to achieve their goal. Then they measured how much each person was willing to keep pushing even though the odds were stacked against them.
And what did they find? Did inheriting a goal make a difference?
The results were pretty clear-cut. Those who inherited their goals were significantly less likely to escalate their commitment. They seemed to be able to detach more easily and make a more rational decision to move on.
Wow, that's fascinating. But hold on. Wouldn't it make sense that people with self-set goals would escalate more? Simply because they feel more responsible. It's their goal, their creation, so they're more invested.
That's a very sharp observation, and the researchers took that into account. They designed a second experiment to specifically address that question. This time, they measured how responsible each person felt for the goal and factored that into their analysis.
So even after controlling for that sense of responsibility, did inherited goals still lead to less escalation?
Yes, the findings held true. Even when people felt equally responsible for a goal, those who inherited it were still less likely to get caught in that escalation trap.
Okay, this is really intriguing. So it's not just about feeling responsible. What else is going on here? Why are inherited goals such a powerful antidote to this whole escalation of commitment thing?
What's fascinating here is that it seems to come down to a sense of ownership, or rather the lack of it. When we set a goal for ourselves, we naturally feel a sense of ownership, an investment in it. It's our baby. We've poured our heart and soul into it. So it's much harder to let go, even when it's clearly not working.
It's like we're emotionally attached to the outcome. So we're more likely to keep pushing even when all signs point to failure.
Exactly. But with an inherited goal, the emotional attachment just isn't there. We didn't choose it. We don't have the same personal stake in it. So we can view the situation more objectively. We're less likely to fall prey to those sunk cost fallacies and emotional biases that can cloud our judgment.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like the difference between, say, writing your own novel and being asked to edit someone else's manuscript. You're going to be far more attached to your own creation, even if it needs a major rewrite.
That's a great analogy. And there's another interesting element at play here: prior commitment. Even if we're assigned a goal, the fact that we've already invested time and effort into it can make us more likely to escalate.
So even if we didn't choose the goal, our past actions can still bind us to it.
Precisely. We start to feel like we need to justify that initial investment, even if the goal itself has become, a bit of a lemon.
Okay, I'm starting to see the big picture here. Inheriting a goal allows us to sidestep that whole psychological baggage of ownership and prior commitment. It gives us a fresh perspective, a cleaner slate, if you will.
Exactly. And that fresh perspective can be incredibly valuable, especially in situations where a project or a goal has gone off the rails.
This has some pretty significant implications, doesn't it? I mean, if someone new to a project is less likely to get bogged down by those past commitments, maybe we should be more willing to bring in fresh blood when things aren't working.
That's a key insight. This research suggests that a new leader, someone who inherits the existing goals, might be better equipped to make those tough decisions about whether to continue or cut bait. They haven't been as deeply involved, they don't have the same emotional attachments, so they can assess the situation more objectively.
So in some cases, inheriting a goal could actually be an advantage.
Absolutely. It can be a powerful tool for breaking free from that escalation trap and making more rational, data-driven decisions. Of course, there's a balance here. We don't want to suggest that people should never feel ownership of their goals. Passion and commitment are obviously crucial for success in many areas of life.
I see what you mean. It's not about being completely detached from our goals. It's about recognizing when those attachments might be leading us down a path of escalating commitment to a lost cause.
Exactly. It's about developing that self-awareness, that ability to step back and ask ourselves, is this goal truly aligned with my values and my vision? Or am I just clinging to it because of sunk costs and a misplaced sense of responsibility?
So how do we actually put this knowledge into practice?
Hmm.
Are you saying we should try to avoid feeling ownership of certain goals? That seems kind of backwards.
It's not about deliberately suppressing ownership. It's more about cultivating a healthy detachment. It's about recognizing when our emotional investment might be clouding our judgment and preventing us from making the big decision. Think of it as a mental shift, a way of stepping back from the situation and asking, if this were someone else's goal, how would I advise them to proceed?
That's really interesting. It's almost like intentionally inheriting the goal from your past self to get a fresh perspective. So are there any practical steps we can take to do this, to spot those escalation traps and avoid falling into them?
Absolutely. The first step, as with most things, is awareness. Now that you know about this phenomenon, you can start to pay attention to those situations where you might be clinging to a failing course of action. Ask yourself, am I holding on because I genuinely believe in this goal? Or is it more about pride, sunk costs, or fear of admitting defeat?
Sometimes it's hard to be honest with ourselves, especially when we've poured a lot of time and energy into something. It feels like giving up is a sign of weakness.
That's where it can be helpful to seek an outside perspective. Talk to someone you trust, someone who can offer a more objective view of the situation. They might be able to see things that you're missing because you're too close to it.
It's like that saying, you can't read the label when you're inside the bottle. Sometimes we need that outside perspective to see things clearly. So once we've identified a potential escalation trap, what can we do about it?
Well, one strategy is to try to detach from the outcome. Remind yourself that it's okay to change course, to pivot, to admit that something isn't working. Failure isn't the opposite of success. It's part of the journey.
And what about those situations where we can't simply abandon a goal, like a project at work or a commitment we've made to someone else?
In those cases, it can be helpful to try to reframe the goal, to find a new way to look at it that feels less like a burden and more like an opportunity. Maybe you can delegate some of the responsibilities or find a way to collaborate with someone who brings a fresh perspective.
So it's all about finding ways to regain that sense of agency, even when we're dealing with a goal that wasn't our original choice. This has been a truly eye-opening deep dive. I have to say, I'm starting to see goal setting in a whole new light. It's not just about charging ahead with unwavering commitment. Sometimes the smartest move is to know when to let go.
That's a great takeaway. Remember, the source of a goal can have a profound impact on our decision-making. By understanding this, we can become more aware of our own biases and make more rational strategic choices.
This has been another fascinating episode of Science Exposed, brought to you by the ever-inquisitive Dr. Cameron Jones. And to our amazing listeners, we hope this deep dive has sparked some new ideas and given you some practical tools to navigate your own goals and decisions. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Science Exposed, and be sure to check out the show notes for more information and ways to connect. Until next time, stay curious.